I will give birth to a new philosophy. Isn't that a grandiose introduction? I'm talking about a philosophy that goes towards post morality. It's a philosophy that encapsulates psychology and spirituality. The philosophy itself is a manifestation of the life drive in form of a fantasy. Here you see all the three components coming together. So the philosophy is a fantasy. The fantasy is psychologic. Philosophy is a pseudoscience like psychology. So the philosophy, the pseudoscience of the philosophy, is a fantasy, and a fantasy is a product of psychology. And at the same time, a fantasy can also be seen spiritual, because when we talk about conscious processes and subconscious processes, which is again coming from psychology, we speak about archetypal processes that also relate to our biology. So part of it is also biology and our ancestors, our DNA. So this philosophy will go post-moral, into a post-moral new era. I believe life and everything that we see in the cosmos is happening as a loop between a limiting factor and an enabling factor. So, between life drive and death drive. And in nature, this creates a perfect circle. And I believe the space that mankind as a whole is currently being feedback looped is in, I believe we are in separation individuation as a mankind as a whole. So mankind exists about 100,000 years. And since then, we have evolved and made many critical inventions like language. So, my philosophy, my fantasy, my spirituality is language. All concepts are language, all consciousness is language. Um, Yet the language can refer to symbols, and symbols can refer to collective subconsciousness, just to show you how interconnected all of this is. So, mankind made many important developments which influenced their own reality very much, like language, written language, logics, discovering mathematics, and so on. Yeah, and I believe that the current state of society and mankind as a whole is the limiting factor is narcissism, and the enabling factor, the life drive side of it, I needed to think about it, is probably love. I don't know. But what happens is that wherever we look at, in companies, the tech companies, whether we look at business, businesses, or whatever is valued and promoted in our society, we always find narcissistic and psychopathic patterns emerge. So, this is the limiting factor. We seem not to have, we seem to be stuck in this, okay? So, in my new philosophy that will lead us towards post morality, what what can we do to overcome this? Because narcissism is something that must be overcome. By the way, um, narcissists have a pathological need to belong, like a dog. A dog needs to belong to a pack, and he can only understand the world through this a priori judgment or through this lens. So the dog has introject constancy, which means he lives in the fantasy where he has to belong, and you are an introject within this fantasy. Um, and a psychopath can prey on narcissists and borderliners alike, because borderliner is just a reverse narcissist. They can prey on them using this absolute codependency. So a narcissist and a borderliner is 100% codependent, potentially, because they have a pathological, compulsive desire, a switch, a heart built in switch to belong. So the borderliner needs to externalize meaning and all purpose and everything that you could be afraid or emotional about into another person, because the borderliner fears his own inner world. The narcissist, however, is God, and nothing is beyond this God. Everything happens within the fantasy. So narcissist is completely divorced from this reality that absorbs the borderliner in some way. So the borderliner is not there. He is in the externalized world. The narcissist is in the internal world, and there is nothing outside of that. And a psychopath can prey on these individuals by using the shared fantasy that is a compensatory mechanism for the borderliner's externalization or the narcissist's internalization, and give this perfect shared fantasy to the victim, to the codependent, and rendering them slaves to the psychopath. The psychopath will use this shared fantasy that he will validate and give to its enslaved, colonized victim, and align the goal-driven shared fantasy, because you need to understand this, the psychopath has a goal-driven shared fantasy, and to get her goal, the psychopath will go to the narcissist or the borderliner, give them their fantasy validation, and recruit them as a slave to pursue the goal of the psychopath in exchange. The psychopath can do many things for the codependent. He is doing the reality testing. He can absorb all negative projection identification without being shaken by it, because the psychopath has no internal attachment to any emotion or any person. So he can take all of this, stabilize the dysregulated, externally regulating people like borderline or narcissist, and at the same time can completely control them by having infinite ability and resource to confront them with anxiety or shame, or shield them from anxiety and shame. And all of this will make these codependents perfect slaves, 100% submitted to the psychopath. Just on a side note. Um, yeah, so in my philosophy, in my new philosophy, we will have to learn about all of this. Narcissism is something that has to be overcome. Of course, every cluster B personality disorder divorces people from the world. So in case of the narcissist is removed from the world of other people and the external world. The borderliner is removed from his internal world, and the psychopath is removed from all worlds and fills this void with her own creations of goals and achievements. In common, what these cluster B personality, these severe personality disorders have in common is that they make people dead in some way, disconnect them from life drive, in my opinion, divorce them from life. They, yeah. So we need to actively avoid to go in any of these directions. So what we do is we have to integrate all of these parts of ourselves without sacrificing our core identity. What do I mean by this? Narcissistic abuse confronts us with our inner child because the narcissist is the negative expression of what a child is. A tyrant, a frustrated child that has learned that it is God above everything, and its godhood does not end where the world begins or where another person begins. So it's all-pervasive, malignant fantasy that also takes hold over your reality and your world. And the child is frustrated if you confront it with limits of its omnipotent godhood. And then if the child does not get the validation of its grandiose fantasy that it can use you to satisfy its all needs, as so it clings to your parental reflexes. It wants you to parent it. But if you deny this, and if you set limits, if you confront it with an end of its omnipotence, if you confront it with reality and your own self-agency, this creates immense frustration, because it more or less falsifies the whole the fundamentals of what the narcissistic personality is built on. And then if they don't get the positive form of attention and validation, so you serve them, you acknowledge, you accept their omnipotent godhood, then they take the negative attention as well, like a child would if mama or papa is confronting them with limits. So this is why our own relationship to our inner child surfaces when we get in contact with narcissistic shared fantasy. So I believe living in close proximity to narcissist and psychopath is inevitably abusive, because the shared fantasy of the narcissist or the borderliner is malignant in itself. It is harmful to live with these people, and of course psychopath as well, for different reasons. So there is things in common with borderline, narcissist, psychopath, but there's huge differences as well. But all of them are not the place to live as a living being, as a fully fledged, developing human being. And what we have to do is, when these inner child things are coming to the surface because of the exposure to this, we need to integrate it and forgive it. And the first thing we do is we let the narcissist that we integrate die in ourself, which means our old self dies. And we will give birth to a new self that still contains the inner child, which means we don't give up on our core identity, but we will add new parts that are yet unknown. Part of this is to overcome morality as well, because being morally acceptable makes us predictable and opens up the gates for the abuse of the predatory parasites. So we must be immoral to not fall victim to abuse, because only then we can be dangerous and unpredictable. Yet it doesn't mean that we want to become narcissist or psychopath ourselves, which requires a huge personal strength and development to stay acceptable, legally accepted, and being immoral at the same time. How can this be done? I believe it can be done again by implementing the healthy parts of all the surfacing traumas that these abusers wake up enough. It's the inner child, and also other parts of masculinity and femininity that have to be integrated in a healthy way, And at the same time, again, we have to overcome moral and maybe even certain ideas of equality. But I will hone in on this. So, morality, not only because it makes us uh, suspectable or opens up opportunities for coercive control and narcissistic abuse and so on, but also because the narcissist and the psychopath will moralize their own behavior as good or rationalize it. So they will use moral as a smear campaign and covering up their own abusive behavior and hiding behind both the moral and the legal system. So, since we don't live in the pre-moral age where Vikings or the Greek lived, we can also not go back to that. Okay, man does not want to go back. We have to go forward. All right. So I believe we have to integrate in some way morality to let go of it again. The same with narcissism. We have to integrate narcissism to let go of it. And the goal of this philosophy will be to work beyond ourselves. The narcissist and the psychopath that keeps society and mankind as a whole stuck because they are self serving. They are only working for themselves. They do not work beyond themselves. They can't do this. And this is what holds back humanity. Therefore, we need a forgiveness. This is what Jesus understood. This is what Nietzsche understood. Every primitive defensive mechanism, like Cain slew Abel, and their own man of Jesus wanted him dead. His own uh, people wanted him dead. All right, and they killed him. So they do this as a primitive defense mechanism. Their grandiosity, their omnipotence was threatened. In other words, they have a narcissistic response and put this on, in this case, Jesus. All right. And in the, you know, or in Cain and Abel, Cain projects this on Abel, and this is why he has to kill them. So but we have to forgive this because vengeance is not an option. In pre-moral age, at the Vikings, vengeance was an option. But we can't do this in the moral, and we can't even do this in the pre-moral age that I want to head towards. It's something new and it is yet to be discovered, and I can't completely describe it yet. But we have to get there, and vengeance is not a top is not an option there, and therefore we need the forgiveness and the goal to work beyond ourselves. To do this, we must integrate many things and overcome many things, amongst them narcissism and morality. Yeah, one more thing that I want to give you as an idea that has to be also implemented into this philosophy, or maybe two things. Um, um, in the Garden of Eden, it was a garden. Before Jesus was crucified, he was in the garden Gethsemane. Um, in these places, it shows the state of innocence and to be a child that is grandiose enough to discover the world in a fearless way, free, or in a courageous way, free of a moral judgment that induces shame and fear. I repeat, the Garden of Eden or the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus resides before his crucifixion, are a symbol for an innocent state where the inner child can explore and experience the world free of moral judgments that induce fear, anxiety, and shame. And with the knowledge of good and evil comes the moral system that induces shame and fear. So once you're out of this garden, when you're in the world, in the wilderness, now it goes with an inevitable confrontation of good and evil, the world of duality, moral world. And this is now again the world, our day and age of narcissism. And this has to be overcome by finding a way towards post-morality. And the second idea I want to give you is that we don't need a rigid ordering system that is man-made. We need a form of order and hygiene and organization in a natural way as a framework, but we also need exposure to the natural chaos which is in the stars, in the Milky Way, in the Andromeda galaxy, in quantum mechanics, in the flow of water, in the weather, in nature, in wood, in music, whatever you want. I believe human beings need to be exposed to a healthy dose of natural chaos and use their abilities to create order from this chaos. In other words, a musician does this. Any artist does this. In whatever art you engage, you do exactly that. So this is my recipe. I want to move towards a post-moral time. I want to integrate everything that I experienced and let die parts of this in order to be reborn. And I also want to work beyond myself. And I know that I have to forgive in order to do this, to not be held back and become narcissistic or psychopathic myself, because these behaviors are based on vengeance and negative thinking. So we need the forgiveness to leave this behind. Yet we also cannot be held back by mercy for our abusers. We have to leave our abusers in the dust, in the jeopardized in the trauma they created and compulsively recreate forever. Yeah, and to do this, we must leave morality and mercy behind us as well. And then create beyond ourselves. And to do this, we need to be exposed to a not man-made, but to a natural chaos, where we use our abilities of pattern recognition to create order, which is an ability that is stored in our DNA. And this is where purpose emerges. So the purpose in ourselves is hidden from us, as long as we live in rigid man-made structures that cut us out of the natural chaos that we would need to make sense of our existence.